land that we seek to get in this area to do events and have Airbnbs and grow food and help provide for the community and a bunch of those things. So we can, I mean, honestly, the potential is limitless once we have that land, what we can do. I want to start doing events like crazy, and I want to get you guys' ideas. Anytime, please feel free to share them with me. And I also have a binder that I created for these meetings that I do with these people, where I show like a portfolio of myself, a business plan where I go into some of the finances, a competitive analysis of there's businesses that have done this locally in the area as well, target market, all sorts of things, products and services. So if any of you guys want to look at this, you can. Of course, the brochure I have on the table as well, talking about that plan. You can share that with anybody if you know any farmers. I actually mailed pretty much every farm in Odessa. Every farm I could find in Odessa, I mailed my plan to, a personal letter to each one of them. Then we also have a list of parcel numbers that I received from the county regarding agricultural properties, which I will talk to the Starkeys and Mitchells about. Food Forest Abundance is the team that will help us design the landscape. That's who's going to be there with the meeting with me. And again, I look at them as like the model for action, what we're going to do. They have 50 acres in Galt's Landing, for those of you who don't know, and they have Airbnbs. They have all these systems set up. So we're just bringing that over here, and we're making it happen. I'm meeting people every day still from different areas that want to do this. And some people, it's like an hour away, it's up north. A lot of times it's up north. I've already been offered that we can do this on land up north, like 60 acres, 22 acres. Like, that's a good amount of land, but the problem is I don't want to leave my family, and I want to create something here. And that's very important to me, because I want to help the people here, like especially all the people that we've networked with, which, you know, there's about almost 200 people on our Telegram now. And that's just from me going to all these different groups. There's MAFA meetings, there's Flat Earth meetings, and I'm finding out there's new ones that I still haven't even gone to. So I'm trying to just bring them all together through Florida United, which is FU, which I have on the barcode on the table. I now have a barcode. You can scan it with your phone, or if you want, you can share it with others. Now you don't have to share the link or try to find it. But the Telegram is the best way to keep in touch, and there's a pinned message. Always the pinned comments on the Telegram is how you find out all the updates. It's probably the easiest platform we can use because it just requires a phone number. But like we have like pictures of everything, like what their design blueprints look like and all that. So I show this to all the people who are curious, and even like the difference between gardening and permaculture. You know, what are food forests and its layers? Why is that important? I went to the Food Advisory Council that's in Pasco. We're one of the only counties that have that in Florida, and they want to find projects like this. They want local food, and they want what they call agritourism, because so many people are coming to Florida. But there's also the problem of developers are taking over, and they're taking over a lot of the farmland, which is why if you go to Odessa, you'll see signs everywhere that say Protect Keystone. Now, Protect Keystone is apparently in part ran by the Keystone Civic Association. So I got in touch with them too. And I'm sharing with them a lot of these ideas because they're all volunteer-based. And the same thing with other groups I ran into. But yeah, so I have like this big thing I wrote on the Telegram, and I don't know how many of you guys read that. I wouldn't expect you to. But basically just some of the updates of what I heard from somebody. On the 5th, I might go to a public hearing. And you guys, if you show up, that could maybe make a big difference. Now, I'm not one to do activism or protest, and it's not that type of thing. If anything, we would just go there, make an impression, and leave. Because I'm not the type to be like, let's talk to politicians. But I did receive this from a family friend of the Starkeys and Mitchells, and I consider him to be pretty reputable. And he says that having someone young like me bring that spirit there and share those ideas, they actually were like looking for that, and they actually kind of want that. So if that helps, great. And he's a really nice guy, and he's the one who helped me make a lot of these connections. And these are families that have been here for hundreds of years, and they care about the land, and they like these ideas.
I've been doing this work for about 18 years as a hypnotist and a life coach. And the work that we do involves people's perceptions, their beliefs, and helping them to change those beliefs from something that is limiting or unproductive to something that is positive. If a person has a fear or a phobia, for example, our job is to help them not be afraid of that thing anymore that's holding them back in their lifetime. And like any power, it can be used for good or for ill. You know, full disclosure, for a time, I was on the other side when it came to guns. And I realized throughout this whole thing, it's just a tool. It's in whose hands it's being used determines whether it's something we would call good or something that we would call bad. It's the same with hypnosis and all of the technology that is involved in mind control and getting people to do what you want them to do. In this case, what I'm going to be talking about tonight is on a massive scale. What are the tools, what are the techniques, what are the principles, what are the studies that have been done that then get enacted? So the first thing that I want to do is talk about what hypnosis is, because every single client who's come to me over the last 18 years, they didn't get a hypnosis class in their high school. They didn't get a hypnosis class in college or in graduate school. Even if they're psychologists, they might have touched on it for 30 minutes, just getting some of the names of the luminaries in that world. But they don't know what it is. And yet all of us have been steeped in these concepts of hypnosis, hypnotize, and mesmerize with entertainment since we were little kids. It's suffused all through popular music. It's in movies, it's in books, it's in comic books. You get the idea. And in that conception, what they're showing you is essentially what they're trying to show you in stage hypnosis. One person, hypnotist, controlling the other person, subject, who enters a catatonic sleep-like state. They do whatever they're told and they don't remember anything. So we think, oh, if I wasn't in a catatonic sleep-like state, I didn't do everything, I had my consciousness around me all the time. I wasn't hypnotized. And yet that is not the definition alone of hypnosis. Hypnosis is like saying automobile. What am I talking about? Am I talking about an 18-wheeler? Am I talking about a minivan? Am I talking about a two-door coupe? I could be talking about any of them. So in hypnosis, that extreme version that you would see in stage hypnosis, the stage hypnotist is really just looking for maybe one or two people in an audience of, could be hundreds, that can exhibit that kind of extreme reaction. But that doesn't mean the rest of us don't go into hypnosis all the time. We do. We just don't know that's what it is. So a few examples. When you're driving your car and you're thinking about something in your life, and 10 or 15 minutes later you pull into your driveway and you go, oh, wait a minute, I don't remember driving the last 10 or 15 minutes. If you're working on a project in your house, or you're cooking, or you're gardening, and you come in and you wash your hands, and you've got scratches from the thorns of the rose bush on your arm, and you didn't remember getting that cut, that's because of hypnosis. An athlete who moves into a flow state, an artist who moves into a flow state, that is hypnosis. We just haven't been taught that's what it is. And we certainly haven't been taught that when you watch television, it's designed to help you enter a hypnotic trance. And that's why people unconsciously will say things like, I want to veg out in front of the TV. I want to zone out in front of the TV. And maybe you call someone's name and they don't answer you. And maybe you call someone's name and they don't answer you. And you call their name a third time and now you're pissed. And that person's like, huh, what? It's because they were in a hypnotic trance. And this is one of the reasons why television advertising is so incredibly powerful. Because a person's subconscious mind, we have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is the house, the repository of our emotional life, our creative life. And P.S., every decision you've ever made in your life emanates first from your subconscious mind as a feeling. And then your conscious mind comes in and it justifies it. Oh, we have to be really careful with our finances this month, honey. You know, we've been spending a lot of money, so let's just pull back on that. And I walk past something, it's like, whoa, that's beautiful. And it's on sale. And I'm getting a raise next month. Let's buy it. That's an emotional decision, primarily, that was then justified by the conscious mind. All right? So hypnosis opens that part of your mind to what we would call a suggestion. Think of suggestion like seeds that you would plant that other things grow from. A suggestion is attempting to change a person's behavior, to change the programming. And what's so sinister about this is that no one thinks that they were influenced by a television commercial. And yet, companies spend billions of dollars every year on these commercials. Don't we think that those actually work? And what if you employed some of this technology on a political level, and you got people to buy into your programs and your policies? Has anyone heard of fifth generation warfare? Is that term familiar? Okay, it is a term that is used by the Pentagon. And it's what they think of as the new battlefield. And what this new battlefield is this battlefield of information and a battlefield of perception. And my contention, what I want to lead to, yeah, come sit anywhere you want. Sure, welcome. Hi. Sure.
Well, now we can't see.
He's tall, we're
Don't
good,
listen to
it's
him.
fine.
Don't listen to him. So fifth generation warfare is a new concept of warfare that the Pentagon is promulgating. And the battlefield is the mind. Information and perception. That is the battlefield. And I'm saying that is the battlefield that is fought with the tools of a hypnotist who is attempting to change people's minds to go from a limiting belief or something that's holding them back to a much more positive outcome. I was saying before, you can use a power for good or for ill. I'm a hypnotist, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm talking about these things from that perspective. And so what I want to talk about tonight is, the first thing is obviously, what is hypnosis? We can't just throw around that word if people are thinking, oh, that's where you're walking around like a zombie in a catatonic state and you do whatever you're told and you don't remember anything. The next thing I want to talk about is I want to get to examples. What are some real world examples in the last 20 years of the mass use of these techniques? And then I want to talk about what my belief is. So I went from working a block and a half away from the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001, to coming home and totally shaken and feeling like I had to join the military. I felt like our country had been attacked. Well, it had, but I thought it had been attacked by the official story attack. And I tried to join the Army, and I was too old. I was 39. And so I called up the New York National Guard, tried to join them. It was too old. They later raised the age, but at the time I was 39 and it was 36. I went from that to being red-pilled when I became a firefighter and an EMT when we moved to Connecticut. Because of 9/11, because of the loss of the life of all those firemen, I wanted to do something. And I went to the ceremonies, right, like on September 12th, my wife and my kids and I were in New York, and we went to these ceremonies, and I was sobbing. And a year later in Connecticut, I went to another ceremony at a football field at a high school, and I was crying again. And I'm like, fuck it, I want to do something. But as I got deeper into being a firefighter and an EMT, one of the other firemen, a training officer, said to me, watch this video. And it's showing me the video about the Pentagon and how it's total bullshit, the story. Like, it's just obviously fake. And so that was my blue pill moment. So when COVID rolled around in March of 2020, I felt like I'd seen this movie before. And because I'm a hypnotist and because I work in the world of persuasion and subconscious influence, I thought this something is wrong here. When the whole mask thing came out, I thought as a firefighter, this is bullshit. Why do we spend $3,000 for an air pack to go into a fire? Well, we could just get a mask, just a little paper mask, we'd be fine. And a smoke particle is like gigantic compared to a viral particle. But why do people buy this? Why do people, we were talking earlier about people driving in their car with a mask on.
Because their car has COVID, I told you.
It's either that or they are a victim of mind control. That is what is happening. So I want to decode the principles as simply and easily as I can of how we as hypnotists would help other people to change their minds. Because I think then we could apply those principles to 9/11. We could apply those principles to COVID. And you can see like this how this is being done. So the first piece is repetition. When you think about education, formal education, from whether you're in kindergarten or you're getting your doctorate, the main principle of education is repetition. If you want to learn how to do something, you repeat it over and over and over again. And you go from being incompetent at that skill or with that knowledge to being consciously competent. And I would say when you really learn it, you become unconsciously competent. So we are all presumably unconsciously competent at shaking hands, at tying our shoes, at driving our cars. And that's one of the reasons why when you're driving your car, it's so easy to move into hypnosis, because you're already unconsciously competent at this. You don't need your conscious mind to drive a car. And your conscious mind can go off into, oh, the movie I saw last night, or I'm really worried about the bills that I have to pay. So repetition is the only technique that is used in formal education. If they use these other techniques, they'd actually be better at it. And a person, when they're between the ages of 7 and 9 years old, something happens in the mind. The division between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind kind of hardens. Something called the critical factor comes into place, which is almost like an executive assistant. And their job for the CEO of a corporation is to prevent you and me from talking to the CEO. They only let through a very select number of people or messages to that CEO. Otherwise, they would be so busy all day they couldn't do anything else. That's the distinction between our conscious mind and our subconscious mind, and this little gateway called the critical factor or the critical faculty. That comes into play 7, 8, 9 years old. We say children that are younger than that are like sponges, right? We've said this, you've heard this? Mm-hmm. Why? Because they learn stuff like this. If we all wanted to learn to speak French, and we don't speak it now, and there was a 5-year-old here, who would learn the fastest?
5-year-old.
Right, because you have complete and total access to their subconscious mind. They are wide open. They are literally sponges. For an adult, we have this thing closed off. What opens it up? These factors. Repetition. This is the most cumbersome of the ways of doing this because it's like battering down a door until finally you knock the door down, you get in, and now you become unconsciously competent at this thing because the subconscious has absorbed this new skill or this new information. The second one is emotion. When a person is in emotionally charged or heightened state, that critical factor moves out of the way. Now they are like that 5-year-old child. They are wide open to anything. And I've seen and worked with this firsthand, not just as a hypnotist, but also as a firefighter and as an EMT. So both in Connecticut and in upstate New York, I responded to motor vehicle accidents. So you come upon a motor vehicle accident, it's nighttime, it's raining, there's all of these lights, from the apparatus and from police cars and from ambulances. There's smoke coming off one of the cars, sometimes the car is on its side, and there are people inside those cars that I guarantee you, the word we would all use in here is what? Shock. Mm-hmm. Right. Shock is a hypnotic state. That critical factor is wide open and they're totally in their subconscious mind. Now that person could be screaming, they could be totally hyperventilating, and another EMT is trying to get oxygen on them, they're trying to start maybe a line, a PICC line. So it's important to get them to calm down. As a hypnotist, knowing they're in that state, I could move them from even in intense pain, move them to totally calm within 2 minutes. Look in my eyes. Do you prefer the beach or the ocean?
Ocean.
Close your eyes and go there now. And then I just start talking them down into, you're on the ocean right now. Listen to the sound of the waves. Feel the warmth of the sand on your body. Feel the sun shining down on you. You can be there now while we do what we have to do. Just stay there and notice how good you start to feel as you continue listening to my voice. Now, a person who's already in hypnosis is going to go to a really deep state right away, and any perception of pain, which is all recognized in the mind, is going to begin to dissipate. Okay, the third one is the effect of a peer group. So we are more like dogs than we are like cats. We are herd animals. What does it feel like if you go to a black tie event and you're wearing a ripped pair of jeans and a t-shirt? Doesn't feel good, right? Because you stand out. What does it feel like if you're in formal wear and everybody else is dressed in casual wear? It doesn't feel good because you stand out. You don't have to tell kids in high school how to dress. They're all going to dress the same way, like each other, because the effects of a peer group are enormously powerful. And this is one of the keys to changing behaviors. Studies will show that people who have a weight problem have friends and relatives who have a weight problem. Because subconsciously, to lose the weight means to stand out and apart from the herd. Where is it safe for a herd animal? Is it by itself, or is it in the center of the herd? Anybody?
Center.
Exactly. Yes. And I don't know if other people felt this way, but at the height of COVID, well, we were living in New York State, which is rapidly turning into a part of the communist country in the United States. It's one of the leaders, actually.
Yes.
And that's the reason that we moved to Florida. And walking into a supermarket without a mask on felt really uncomfortable. Because suddenly I was outside the herd. And my deepest programming tells me it's not safe there. So I work with athletes. I work with professional athletes. I work with collegiate level athletes. And one of the things that has come up in working with these athletes is the concept that we always use with athletes, like, oh, he's a real standout. Oh, she's a real standout. What does that mean when you think about a herd, right? They've got the courage. They've got the fortitude. They've got something that allows them to stand up and stand out, not to fit in. And with some of the athletes I work with, that's something we actually have to work on. Some of the nervousness that they feel is in the actual standing out. The way I felt, wearing a mask, going into a grocery store at the height of COVID and feeling like, oh shit, everyone's looking at me. Someone's going to come say, get out of the store or whatever. I actually think of all the techniques, the peer group is one of the most powerful. And it's no coincidence that this is used in television commercials. 4 out of 5 Americans use this product. What do you think they're trying to say? We have shortcuts in our brain. Humans are really, really good with shortcuts so that we don't have to do any more work than what is required. And if I know, hey, my best friend just bought that product and my neighbor bought it and my dad bought it, well, it must be safe for me. It must be a good deal. You know, if we're cave men and women and I watch a bunch of people go down to the stream and drink out of it, and I watch them for another hour or so and they don't keel over, it's like, well, it must be safe for me. That's a shortcut. And that is what marketers and now very sophisticated political operatives are using. Another one of these techniques. Another one is authority. So if some random person, homeless person, walks up to you on the street and says, you have a tail, you're probably not going to go, oh, let me see if I have a tail. But if your doctor tells you have a tail, you might actually look. You know, how do you feel when a police officer pulls you over? You think the police officer might be pulling you over, and then they go by, you know, your heart starts beating and everything else. Authority figure. This is another thing that was working in my favor as a firefighter because I would show up in firefighter turnout gear with helmet and all this other stuff and walk up to someone. Now I'm an authority. So I've got authority working for me, and I know I have emotion working for me. And I know that I can repeat certain suggestions and drive it right into their subconscious mind, and that person's just going to go from this amped up state to a totally relaxed state. Even in significant pain. One of the calls I responded to was a 12-year-old boy who was suffering from sickle cell anemia. And he had this massive pain in a wheelchair. And he was screaming and crying. And in about 2 minutes, I was able to get him totally calm. No perception of pain. His father walks in the room and barks at him. Pain comes right back. Mm-hmm. And this brings up another point, which is the hypnotic state, in my opinion, is not terribly stable. Mm. And for that reason, censorship has to come to play. And this leads us, and I won't talk about this right now because we're going to get to it, but this leads us to what are we supposed to do? What is the best way, A, for us to recognize what's happening and protect ourselves and protect our families? But also, how do we answer that question that people have been posing from the beginning of this madness, which is, how do I talk to my sister? How do I talk to my children? How do I talk to the closest people to me who totally reject what I have to say? And what really impressed me about this was you start following some of the luminaries out there, like Dr. Peter McLaughlin and others at that level. And they say, my relatives won't listen to me. So clearly, it's not the rational, conscious, science-based approach that is somehow going to get through to these people. Why? Because they're in a state of deep hypnosis. And we have to understand that. Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War thousands of years ago. It's considered to be the Bible of how to engage in warfare. And some of the principles he said were, do not fight on their battlefield, fight on yours. Do not fight at a time of their choosing, fight at a time of your choosing. And if you have to actually fight kinetically, you've lost. Because you should be able to get what you want through other means. Subterfuge, right? Spying, misleading, which is what's being used against us. So I'm not saying to spy, mislead, and use subterfuge on your family members. But I am suggesting that you understand the state that they're in. And I wanted to offer, before we leave tonight, some ways of maneuvering with this in mind, of how to begin to break this spell, if you will, break the hypnotic trance, and get through. And it may not happen immediately, but using these techniques, you're going to be way more successful than trying to bang down the door with one more study. Okay, and then the last thing that we were taught in hypnosis school was hypnosis. So opening that subconscious mind, and now whatever you say is going to go directly into the subconscious mind. So all 5 of these, I was sitting in a classroom in Santa Fe, New Mexico in 2006 studying hypnosis, and we were learning these 5 things, and we broke for, bathroom break or whatever. And I remember just being overwhelmed, thinking, holy shit, all 5 of these things were used on us on 9/11. Right? The story came out like that. Pancake. 19 terrorists. We know exactly who they are because, one of the passports survived a raging inferno that was hot enough to melt steel, but not hot enough so that the people in the gaping hole couldn't be waving out there like this, waving their t-shirts, come help me. Those people should have been incinerated. Firefighters should not have been able to get to the floor where the impact occurred. The heat would have been too great if it was 1,000 to 2,000 degrees and sustained. So, repetition. The media kept saying the same thing. And it took them a day or two, because in the first day or so, there were people in the media saying, wow, it sounds like bombs going off. And there were people, witnesses, including firefighters, police officers, and others who said, we heard bombs going off. But they didn't put them on the news. Mm-hmm. They packaged a story, and then they repeated the hell out of it. Emotion. Was there any emotion on that day, do you imagine?
Oh my gosh.
Right? There's something called trauma-based mind control that the CIA, we know for a fact they engaged in it in something called MK Ultra in the late 50s into the 60s and into the 70s, where they used trauma, they inflicted trauma on people. They used hypnosis on people, and they used psychoactive drugs on people. Okay, so emotion, very high emotion on 9/11. People's subconscious mind is wide open because that critical factor has moved out of the way. Just like a person in a car accident that I would go and deal with as a firefighter EMT. The third group is peer group. Who are they going to interview from down there? Who was there? Crisis actors. Right? That becomes your peer group. Like, it's amazing to watch these things. I used to be a professional actor. My wife was too. She did commercials. I did soap operas in New York City. And the acting is quite bad, actually. It's kind of robotic. You can tell this person just has a script and they're just repeating it of what happened. Like this guy standing away, the heat was too hot and they didn't have pancake. Like, how are they going to know that? Right? Right, so your peer group. And the other thing I want to say is the word Bolshevik. Does anybody know what the word Bolshevik means?
No.
From your history?
Sound like bullshit.
It's Russian. It's Russian. This has to do with the Russian Revolution, 1917, Trotsky, Lenin, etc. Bolshevik in Russian means one of the majority. One of the majority. Do you think that has anything to do with this concept right here, a peer group?
Yeah.
Right. Were the Bolsheviks the majority in 1917? No. They called themselves the majority, but they weren't. But it was brilliant because they understood how the human mind works. We are herd animals. We feel safer when we are with the herd. We don't feel so safe when we are outside of the herd. Like me walking into the supermarket wearing a mask thinking, oh, somebody's going to walk up to me.
Not wearing a mask.
Not wearing a mask.
Not wearing a mask, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that correction. The next one is authority, where authorities trotted onto the screens very quickly to tell us exactly what happened. Absolutely. You have your trusted news anchor. You know, Channel 5 is by your side. They're there to protect you. If you have a problem, you just call those guys with the really nice hair. They'll be right at your house to protect you.
And they all say the same thing.
Yeah, they all say the exact same thing. Right. So they have a perception of authority, even though they literally don't wear pants, a lot of them. I had a friend who was a newscaster. Because they're sitting down. They're very serious, and they've got like a swimwear on or something. But then they would bring on people from the CIA, military people, politicians. And now they're all telling you what happened. You're totally hypnotized now. You're repeating stuff, you're high emotion, the effects of the peer group, and now you've got the authority thing that's going. And P.S. the whole time, because it's been a trauma, you're in a state of hypnosis. This is how, on a mass scale, you can convince people that something is true when it's obviously not true. And I would submit that the exact same things were used for COVID. You know, those early television reports were people actually keeling over on the streets in Wuhan, dropping dead like flies, and then having refrigerator trucks parked outside the hospitals in New York City. New York City is a perfect place to stage all of these things, by the way, because it's like the news capital of the world, the fashion capital, the finance capital, I shouldn't say the world, of the United States. And right, and one of the things that I've realized this country's really good at is we're really good at putting on a show. We are awesome at that. We are awesome at telling stories and then blasting that story out into the world. And just as a quick aside, the word Hollywood, it's named after the holly tree. And the holly tree was the tree where a magician would take the wood for the wand to cast spells.
Oh, wow.
Right. Hollywood casts spells. And children learn in school how to spell. They learn about spelling. And they used to write in cursive, the word curse. These are probably not mistakes, any more than the word programming is a mistake when they talk about what is presented on television to us, because it programs our mind.
So you're familiar with the Tavistock Institute, I mean?
Yes, I am. Yep.
What was that?
The Tavistock Institute, it's in the UK, and it's devoted to...
Yeah, Tavistock, England. It was the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers that actually instituted it in the late 1800s with all the world's greatest quote-unquote minds for mind control.
All right, I want to talk next about the Ash experiment. So Solomon Ash was the name of the academic. And what he did was he got a group of Confederates, they call them. So that's basically an actor working for the person that's doing the study. And then one subject. So you might have, let's say, 6, 7, 8 Confederates, and then one actual person. And then he would present them with lines, say, written on a chalkboard, for example. And let's say that there are 6 lines, and 5 of the lines are roughly the same size, and one is obviously much larger than the other 5, or it's obviously much smaller than the other 5. And then he would ask Confederate 1, what's the correct answer? Which one is the anomaly? And Confederate 1 would say something other than the real answer. Confederate 2, same thing. Confederate 3, same thing. Confederate 4, same thing. And by the time they got to the real participant, 75% of the time, 75% of the time, would give the same incorrect answer. Because they've got a vision problem? No. Because they are herd animals just like you and me, and they were terrified of not fitting in.
This is the 25% right here.
I am aware of that. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and that's a really interesting point, because I don't know that we can say this scientifically, but the people who didn't get the vax are probably around 25%. You know, it is said that the people who actively participated in the American Revolution to give us our liberties, it's called 3%, but I think historians say it's much more like 10, but still, come on. They took on the biggest empire in the world, and it was only like 10% of the colonists that actually did it. So it is very interesting. Your point is very well taken, that the people who essentially didn't fall for this maybe make up about 25% of the population.
It's a little bit more. I'm actually a microbiologist, so
okay.
Yeah. It's a little bit more than that.
30?
Closer to 40%.
Closer to 40, okay. Fair enough.
Florida.
Yeah, it's true. Now, the really interesting thing about the Ash experiment is the next part of this study was to have 2 people out of the 6 or 2 people out of the 8 that would give the correct answer. So you have Confederate 1 give the wrong answer, Confederate 2 gives the wrong answer, Confederate 3 gives the correct answer. And by the time they get to the other actual participant, the real participant at 7 or 8, now this number 75% goes down to 25%. And for me, as I was thinking about this talk tonight, this is really important. This is why you can't afford, if you are the social engineers, if you are the deep state, if you are the dark forces, whatever you want to call them, you can't afford to have people speaking freely on social media. Right? You've got to find some way of shutting them down, even if it means violating everything this country has ever stood for. And so the Ash experiment, ties in pretty closely with Matthias Desmet. Has anyone heard of Matthias Desmet? Okay, great. So do you want to tell them who Matthias Desmet is while I write this thing down?
Well, he did the mass psychosis analysis, right?
That's exactly right.
COVID.
Yep. Yeah, he did a big study trying to figure out what is going on. How could so many people fall for this, essentially? Like, what actually is happening? And I want to read his exact quote here. And he called this mass formation psychosis, which he said is a dangerous form of mass hypnosis. There's that word, hypnosis, right? And he said it's brought on by the following: loneliness, a lack of meaning, which he described as people working at bullshit jobs. A job that could go away tomorrow and nobody would notice. You know, it's moving paper from this side of the desk to that side of the desk. Free-floating anxiety. So, again, back to the media. What does the media do? If it bleeds, it leads. Right? Programming on television. You know, we've gone from Mayberry to Lucifer.
Yeah.
That's where we have gone. About some shows about a neighbor eating cannibals, their neighbors. This is what's happened to television in this period of time. And what I know as a hypnotist is that your conscious mind can say, it's only a movie. But there's a reason why movies are advertised as a seat-of-your-pants thrill ride, a roller coaster seat-of-your-pants thrill ride, because you have a physiological response when you watch a movie. If there's a car chase, if somebody in a hockey mask jumps out of a closet and you're not expecting it, your heart rate gets elevated, your muscles get tense, you start perspiring. That's why it feels like a roller coaster.
That's what a 357 is for.
So the anxiety that is created within our culture, I would submit, is largely manufactured. You know, by showing people constantly images of war and of domestic violence and of international violence, and focusing in on small cases of, you know, a horrible double suicide, homicide, or whatever it would be. You know, my wife and I have talked about how if we had lived 100 or 200 years ago, your only mechanism of hearing about something would have been the newspaper long after it happened. And you wouldn't feel that human response like, I should do something. You know, if it happened in your town, you could do something. But we keep getting all this stuff, but we're neutered in a way, because there's nothing that we can do. So what's left? Free-floating anxiety. Toss in an economy that's terrible. kids wondering how they're going to buy a house or how they're going to get a decent job, how they're going to form a family. And it's creating all of this anxiety, a divorce rate that's well over 50% for first marriages. Anxiety. Of the people that come to me, almost all of them are dealing with anxiety. So this is one of the keys to Desmond's, to laying the groundwork so that you could create mass formation hypnosis. And what I'm saying is that in order to do that, that critical factor has to be out of the way that we talked about. And then the last couple of things that he said was frustration and aggression, and then consistent messaging from government and mass media. There's your fifth generation warfare. Information and perception. And what he said was, and this gets to what can we do about this? This gets to the Ash experiment. Break the illusion of consensus. Right? When I wore my mask and walked into a grocery store, I was contributing to the illusion of consensus. I didn't believe any of this bullshit, but you wouldn't know by looking at me, right? When I actually was able to walk in without it on, I was breaking the illusion of consensus. It's that easy. It's that whole thing of going from 75% of people giving the obviously wrong answer down to 25% of the people giving the obviously wrong answer. That's a massive difference. That's enough to stop this thing in its tracks. So I would say if you take away nothing else from tonight, think of what Desmond said about breaking the illusion of consensus and recognize that it's tied directly in with the Ash experiment. This has already been proven. What happens when one other human being has the courage to give the correct answer, and then all these other people rise up. And I felt that in New York. If I was walking around without a mask and I saw someone else without one, it was like, my soul brother, my soul sister, like, come over here.
So you would have hated me.
Why is that?
I never wore one. I used to get ostracized all the time, but I usually have the...
No, it's actually the exact opposite. I'm saying that when I walked in without a mask...
Oh, you didn't wear one?
Yeah.
On the times I didn't, because at first I did and I felt horrible.
Okay.
But when I didn't wear one, and I saw one other person in the supermarket, there could have been 100 people in there, and they weren't wearing one either, I felt this intense bond and connection with them. Right? It gave me power. It gave me strength. In a way that I found in the fire department. This one time I was doing this training evolution where we were going through a maze. And you can't see anything. Everything is totally pitch black. You have your air pack on. You've got your helmet. You're bumping into things. And I couldn't find my way out of this damn thing. And I was starting to have that feeling, like a little bit of a panicky feeling, even though I know there's no fire. And another firefighter came along. He couldn't figure it out either. We couldn't even see each other, but we could hear each other. And the instant I heard his voice, the instant we started communicating, I felt... And then my thinking went from my lizard brain, which is only concerned with survival, to my prefrontal cortex. And we slowed down and we were like, oh, it's up there. We're looking for it down here. We had to stand up, reach over the top, and haul ourselves up over the top. But it was his voice. I'd never even met this guy. It was just the voice of another human being who was in the same predicament trying to work through this with me that made all the difference. And I feel like that's what we're doing. We're breaking the illusion of consensus. We're supporting each other. We're giving people permission to step into some form of courage, that it's okay to disagree with things that are obviously false. Does anyone have any questions so far? 'Cause we're almost out of time.
What time is it?
It's 7:25.
Is she still in the ocean?
She what?
She's still in the ocean? I was wondering
She's
if we
still
took
in
her
the
to...
ocean?
Yeah.
You have to ask her.
She's always in there.
I have
Yeah.
a question, just a comment. It's so obvious how the media always makes you feel like you're the vast minority
Yeah.
when you're going against the mainstream
Sure.
agenda. You're like the 1 in 1,000.
Which is precisely what the Bolsheviks did in 1917 when they called themselves the Bolsheviks, which means one of the majority. Even though they weren't the majority, they recognized that creating that perception was key into promulgating what they wanted.
Yeah.
To convince the undecided that this is the safe place to be because they're the ones that are the majority. And again, as human beings, we're hardwired not to be in the majority. To be in the majority, to be with the herd. And in essence, we're almost like a psychopath or a sociopath if you just like screw everybody else.
Yeah.
Well, and part of this is the influence of public schools.
Right.
So we didn't send our kids to a public school system.
No.
And and we didn't have a television in our house.
That's huge. Very.
We did not have a television in our house. We didn't say we're going to limit watching TV to when they go to bed. We got rid of it.
I threw it out the window.
And good for you. Yeah. And when our kids asked us, why don't we have television and other kids do, we said, because the purpose of television is to sell you things you don't need. That's the only reason it's there. They're funding everything else.
They said, well, we lived in Pennsylvania, all Amish, and the reason Amish never got COVID is because they don't have TVs.
That's right.
So that was exactly what.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that I think a lot of people, and I can't speak for a lot of people, but we had an Amish builder that worked for us when we lived in New York. And he knew this right away.
Right,
He knew this in
they do,
March.
they
He's like,
do.
because he's not corrupted in a sense. The programming hasn't infiltrated his subconscious mind. P.S. His teeth were the best looking teeth I've ever seen in his life.
Really?
Yeah. It's like he never went to a dentist, but he had this perfect
Raw
teeth.
milk.
Yeah, raw milk, exactly. And no dentist and no fluoride and all that other stuff.
Who
Any
is
other questions?
Who was that?
He was our builder when we lived in upstate New York. He was
Oh.
Amish.
Okay.
And he got this immediately, immediately. And then he also just looked really healthy.
One of the things that I experienced in the early COVID days was the tremendous deception at viewing my friends, people I thought were my friends, who never questioned, bought into this bullshit right from the beginning. And I would say, you guys, you're nuts. Wake up. Don't you see what's going on here? No, it's you that's nuts.
Okay, so let's use that as a segue to go back to this what can we do thing. So I talked about breaking the illusion of consensus. I talked about the futility that I think we have all felt by just putting another study in front of someone, putting another authoritative person in front of someone. That doesn't work because it's happening at the emotional level, at the subconscious level. So one of the things that I have noticed is that if you say to almost anyone, politicians are all assholes. People go, yeah, they are. They are. The average person, no matter, they could have had shots, boosters, they would say that that's true. But if you say the Democrats are all assholes, they'll fight you.
Yes.
Right? If you say the Republicans are all assholes, they'll fight you. So part of it, I think, is asking questions. Because here's the thing, hypnotically. As soon as you ask a question, you force the mind of the other person to go to the answer. They have no choice. So if you ask them questions and you say, do you think the government ever lies? Do you think politicians ever lie?
Everybody lies. Everybody does.
Sure.
Anybody
Okay.
who says they don't lie.
Sure. But you see what I mean? Like, do you think they always have your best interests at heart? Do you think that they take donations from large, wealthy corporations? Do you think that they have a disproportionate interest to represent those large corporations? Yes.
But many of these people believe what my doctor said, and I trust my doctor. Which is a little different than the whole political thing. They just, Dr. Scott's what to say about that.
Sure, and I'll get to you in just a second. I would suggest, A, that this isn't like, oh, I just push that button and they just go, wow, I'm on your side. This can take a while because the programming has taken a lifetime from public school all the way through, right? So you can't expect that they're just going to turn. But if you put them on the defensive, you've made yourself into an enemy. That's not going to work. In order to reach anyone, you have to establish rapport. They talk about this in sales. That until you have rapport, you don't want to make your offer. If the person doesn't trust you, if I'm a telemarketer, you don't know who I am, I don't have rapport with you. I have to build the rapport before I can expect that you will be open to me. And at that point, I can't push you too hard. I can't put you on the defensive because if I do, I got a fight on my hands, and now you're moving farther away and I'm perceived as the enemy. This works the same way in our personal relationships. If you're in an argument with your significant other and you're both defensive, you're both out of rapport, they're not going to hear what you have to say. You're not going to hear what they have to say, and you just escalate. What happens then? You need to break the pattern. Neurolinguistic programming talks about breaking a pattern. And their famous way is, you smell popcorn?
Yeah, cognitive disassociation.
Yeah, oh, forget it, I'm sorry. What were we talking about? Now you have to go back to square zero to start the fight from there. And because how often do people even remember what they thought about?
Yeah.
They're unfolding these patterns that have to do with defensiveness. You're my enemy, I'm your enemy. We don't want that. We want to remain in rapport and just start asking questions, knowing that in their mind, they have to go into their mind to answer the question, even if they don't say it to you. You want to plant seeds like suggestions. Like, you know, I could even make the statement, you know, I think all politicians are assholes. What do you think? And they might say, yeah. You know, I just don't trust those guys. They're all in it for their own good. Yeah. And I don't have to go right away to COVID. I don't have to go right away to something else. But I can start the process. Remember, it can take a while. Just don't let them become your enemy, because then you've lost. The other thing I wanted to talk about is, it's my personal belief that this whole thing is it's like World War II, where they called them theaters, the European theater, the Pacific theater. It was a world war. And I feel like this one is not just across the globe, but I feel like it has a spiritual dimension to it as well. And I believe that the word corrupt is very important. And the reason I believe this is because I was thinking about the original use of that word. That's what they would talk about with a body that had died, right? That as it decomposes, they would say the body is corrupt or corrupted. And I think that we are under a kind of seduction from whatever I would call them, the dark forces: pornography, gambling, alcohol, materialism, drugs, technology. All of these things are seducing us because they are pleasurable and they appeal to our lower chakras, not the higher ones, and they begin to corrupt us. So think about a politician. The first time a politician votes a certain way because somebody gave them a campaign donation, they have begun the process of corrupting themselves. They are starting the process of dying. And so in my own meditation, I was asking about this, and the answer I got was, they are seeking disorder. They are trying to destroy everything. The symbol of Satanism is an upside down cross, an inverted cross. And what do we see with our Justice Department, our justice system? It's producing injustice. What do we see with our education system? It's producing, I don't want to say dumber and dumber people, but it's producing people that know less and less and can function less and less in the world. Our healthcare system is really producing disease and death. Our Defense Department is producing war. Our economic system, our Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve System is producing bankruptcy. And so what I got was to create, first of all, order in our own lives as individuals first, and in our families. That's our first step, because then we become a kind of beacon for other members of the herd who are now getting sick, who know somebody who died unexpectedly, who just dropped over. But this dude is totally healthy. That's going to activate my deeper programming. Hey, what are you doing? Can you tell me about your diet? And so I think that that's a big part of this. And then to be consistent, to not let ourselves get seduced by all of those things that I mentioned, so that we can be stronger. Our diets are better. We're going to the gym. We're not drinking alcohol to excess. We're getting off of useless drugs that we don't need anyway. Right? We're programming our own mind with what we want in there, not with what they want in there. So I think that that's important too, because back to your closest relative or your closest friend, as this goes on, and they start getting more and more confused and upset and anxious, and your body's looking good, and you're calm, and you've got a glow on your face, and your life is going well, and your finances are in order, they're going to start looking to you and being willing more perhaps to trust what you have to say. You know, when you go into social media and you look at people who are fitness experts, you generally see people who are fit. And that's why people follow them. You know? Well, a quote that I heard was, if you want to teach people how to get a six-pack abs, you better have them yourself. If we want to bring order back to our country, back to our society, back to our families, if we want to bring health back to our communities, don't we have to lead the way? So that was another big thing that I wanted to say in terms of what we can do. And I think that this gets all the way up. So it gets from your, whatever it is for you, however you connect with the divine. You know, whether it's through an organized religion or on your own, whatever you call the divine doesn't matter. But have a relationship there. And then all the way down through, make sure your mind is right, that you're listening to things that are not undermining you. That you're watching things that are not undermining you. They're eating things that are not undermining you. So I wanted to get that out there. Yeah.
My father's dying slowly.
Okay, sorry.
He didn't listen to me and my brother.
Yeah.
It's crazy how people don't see, like, my cousin was 52, healthy as an ox, died in his sleep. My buddy from high school, 48, died in his sleep.
Wow.
He has beautiful kids, young kids. And it's going to be tough. It could happen anytime. And we lost our mother when we were kids.
So here's a question.
Sorry.
We tried our best.
The FLCCC detoxification protocol.
We don't listen to anything.
Right.
If you don't have a lab
I
coat.
helped write part of that detoxification
Right.
protocol.
Right.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
We
And
can
it
talk
works.
after here. That'd be great, man.
We'll exchange.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.
I tried. Me and my older brother tried, and he just automatically shuts you down, and because of his beliefs.
Okay, so what I'd like to offer, I felt like I saw some of this firsthand early on, where in my family of 5, I was the only one that was seeing this, and it was looking like divorce, potentially. My kids thought I was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I really had to confront the idea that my kids were going to get the vaccine. And my job is to protect them.
Yeah.
Right? And where I came to, and I don't know if it's useful for you, but where I came to was that back to the spiritual component. Mm-hmm. This is a spiritual war. We don't die when our physical body dies. Our consciousness lives on. And if you need to prove that to yourself, just go into YouTube and type in NDE, near-death experience, and listen to hundreds of people talking about being clinically dead for a period of time and then being revived. And 40% of those people have a period of consciousness while they are dead.
My grandmother, my dad's mother, my grandmother.
Okay. All right.
She saw her body leaving. She saw
Exactly.
everything. She even explained to the women what they were wearing, their specific pants, and she was dead.
Yep.
And they didn't
Yep.
see her, like
Yes.
she wasn't alive.
That's right. But with our vision, we can see. I'm going to write this down because I find it very interesting. With your physical eyeballs, because we say seeing is believing. This is how much of the light spectrum we see. Zero 0.0035%. That's how much we see with our eyeballs. We see nothing. In Shakespeare's Hamlet, Shakespeare has the character of Hamlet say, "I will bind myself inside a walnut shell and call myself master of all I survey." This, ladies and gentlemen, is the walnut shell. That's the prison that we are being locked into. The perception of little me.
Well, it's the challenge that's been given to us.
It is definitely a challenge.
Turn it
Yes,
around.
and what I'm saying is that the master metaphysicians on the dark side, because they accept all of the spiritual stuff, they have locked many people and are attempting to lock all of us into this perception. Remember I said 5th generation warfare is about information and perception. That's what you see. So back to your thing. And where I came to was, my family are each on their own spiritual path, on their own spiritual journey. And if this is what their soul is choosing, I can't disrupt that.
You just gave me chills because I actually said to my couple friends and one of my brothers, I said, I think my father's, or our dad's soul wants to die. I don't know what it is. I've always had intuition, or I can read people, or I don't know, maybe it's the frequency, but yeah, I think his soul wants to leave.
That could very well be. And if that's the case, then we have a spiritual obligation under spiritual law to not try to change, to not prevent him from doing that. We can speak to him, we can talk to him, we can try to coerce him, we can do these things, but ultimately we're not driving that car, he is. And I'm not saying that this means, oh, well, I can just let go of this. But there is, at least for me, there was a peace in this. And paradoxically, it meant that when I wasn't pushing so hard and putting in yet another study in front of my family, I became less and less of the weirdo, the outlier, the I'm not going to say enemy, but something akin to that, like no rapport whatsoever. And as I let that go, the rapport built up. And so when I would say things, it could be received more easily, more readily. And then when my wife saw this, kind of on her own, now we became like the Ash experiment. 75% down to 25%, and had more influence over what our children were thinking. Because now, I could say one was crazy, but two is a little bit harder. So I'm really sorry that you have dealt with these people passing, and with your dad, what's going on with him. It's got to be horrible. And the only thing I can offer is this concept of we are spiritual beings, and that there is a reason for all of this, and that we don't just live one lifetime. That's my experience in 18 years of working with people and doing past life regression, that we all live multiple lifetimes, that our souls enter into contracts before we're born. And that maybe there's an important reason, like, for example, your 48-year-old friend that you went to school with, maybe there's somebody else whose life he actually saved because he died, and this guy's like, holy shit, I've got to do something.
Yes.
100%. Like nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted.
Right.
Every experience we have, no matter how painful, no matter how shitty, teaches us something. Even if it's not the first experience, it might take us 5 experiences of waking up in a gutter drunk before we go, I can't do this anymore. I need to change. Those experiences weren't wasted, therefore. And these deaths, as painful as that is for us as human beings, I mean, I was a firefighter, EMT, I was trying to save people's lives, that I had to make my peace with. We can't save everybody.
Right.
Even our own family members.
Yeah.
I was trying to save people who I didn't even know. But we have to make peace with not being able to save our family members. And I honest to God, I have to wonder, and I would have thought I was crazy saying this 5 years ago, but that whole concept of the rapture, where some people just, they're gone, and the other people stay, sounds a lot like 3-dimension and 5-dimension to me. And it sounds a lot, this is one more thing I want to say if you guys are willing to stay and listen to it, is there's Rudolf Steiner is a, so you know who he is.
Yeah.
He's
Other
a
people here too.
Okay, German mystic, flourished like in the 1920s, and he started biodynamic farming, which is a really cool principle of farming, and he started the Waldorf schools, which our kids all went to Waldorf school. I said they didn't go to public schools. He actually said, I think you guys may appreciate this, but he said in a speech in 1923, he said, in the future, man will develop a, quote, vaccine to essentially disconnect human beings, other men, you spoke in terms of male, from God. And that in ancient times, in Jesus' time, the powers that be viewed Jesus as a, quote, virus, and they needed to come up with a vaccine to inoculate the people against that kind of virus. Now, he also talked about this character, which I had never heard of before. Ahriman, yeah. Yeah, you should be up here. Ahriman and Satan were like these two gods of this earth, dark forces, and Ahriman is the god of technology. And for the first time in my life, we talked about the Amish before. It's like, wow, do they have this thing figured out or what? Maybe they do. Because I was thinking, when people were terrified, with all of the fear that was being thrown at us, remember the people dropping dead in the streets of Wuhan, the refrigerator trucks parked outside of the hospitals in New York City. Who knows if there were any bodies in those trucks? Right?
I know a woman who worked in that hospital, and I talked to her on the phone.
And?
I said, honestly, what's the percentage versus COVID versus your protocols? She said 50-50.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Remdesivir and so on, and intubating people.
And one of the doctors said out loud, he said, oh my God, we're killing all these people.
Yep. Yep.
So she
Yep.
quit.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the point I want to make here is that...
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm glad you added that in. The point I want to make is that when we're terrified, we essentially have two choices. We're at a fork in the road. And one of the paths, I think, what we're being led down is the tech path. And the other path, I'm going to call it God.
Well, you could call that AI too. instead of-
Tech?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, sure. AI is a form of...
It's just a broader term and it's more,
Yeah, yeah.
that's what the dark force is seeking to turn into God.
Completely agree with you, and it's one of the things the Pentagon lists under fifth generation warfare. They list AI as one of the tools. But anyway, two paths here. And I think the people who, in a state of terror, threw on the mask, and some are still wearing it in their cars, have gone down from this fork in the road along that path. And I think there were other people that were able to take a breath and place their faith somewhere else. Because as a hypnotist, I know how easy it is to corrupt our conscious mind, to plant things in there. But there's another part of you that you might call your intuition. You know, people might refer to it as epiphany, insight. When you have a big decision to make, people say sleep on it. What does that mean? It means allow your conscious mind to become unconscious so another part of you can come forward. And I think that this other part is something like this. This intuition, like something's not right here. Right? Hasn't that kept us alive since the beginning of time? Aren't we the descendants of people that made it through much worse stuff than we're going through? That maybe followed their instincts, that banded together, that used courage, and that had faith. Particularly the faith that there are fates worse than death. You know, that's not my original statement, but this is an important statement. There are things that are much worse that can happen to us than dying. The worst they can do to us is kill us. And if you know, because of people with NDEs, you know one of them. If you have a strong faith and you believe, hey man, I'm just here. If I'm lucky, I'm here for like 90 years or something. If I'm lucky. This isn't all there is. And if you really believe that, you become a little bit more, I'm going to use the word immune, to the fear of death. And when you become immune to the fear of death, you start becoming more courageous. You start being
free.
You become free. Exactly. Right. I'm sorry, who had a question? Yeah, sorry.
Well, it's just amazing. I did a series of videos for anyone who's curious, like 6 videos on Carl Jung. And he said before his death, he knows God. And I'd be curious maybe what you have to say about that as well, but he talks about mass psychosis and similarly mass hysteria. I mentioned in the videos that he also mentioned that, and it's also been studied, that the most religious states and countries are the most free. But also that he said in his last book, The Undiscovered Self, that when you have a higher authority than man, you do attain that state of freedom. He talked about extensively, he called it state slavery, and that's literally what he called it. And my focus of my work, which I've never done an event on, which I can do, especially now that you did this, because I told you this is like my wheelhouse, I write about this stuff till 2 a.m. in the morning. Sometimes I have to give myself a break because I'm talking about slavery. But the abolitionist material from the 1800s was full of this. They were people who had to convince many people, millions of people, about the end of chattel slavery and convince them that it was wrong. And many people just said, no, You're not really, like, you're crazy. We had chattel slavery for all thousands of years. We can't end it. And they were really religious people. And so they were like, well, the churches are supporting slavery too, but they're not really actually supporting God. And so you had this feud in religion. And that's why you had the deist movement and the Protestants, and they were all like, basically, though emphasizing that individualism connected to God. That in which the church was being overthrown by the government, which Carl Jung said that's what made the government more dangerous, is when the government acted as religion, acted as authority.
Right.
And now, through a lot of the works I talk about, the most dangerous superstition, Larkin Rose calls authority the actual root cause problem, because it takes away an individual conscience, which is, you say, the thing that connects you to God and puts you at odds with the systems that be, which rely on you turning off your conscience. Which is why now you see spiritual anarchists like Daniel Arnold, who was our last guest, who was 20 years law officer. And the word anarchy is not fearful anymore in people nowadays, as it was in the abolitionists, who were the first anarchists in America. And they were not throwing fires in the streets. They just wanted to be free. And they realized that governments created slavery, and they feed off of this man-made authority, which is quite literally in opposition to God. And so they called it God's government. And they said they owe no allegiance to human government. And I have writings extensive in their material. They kept it all in the back of libraries. And I have, now I'm gathering a bunch of material. The book is going to be like 500 pages long. Look forward to like the end of the month, because I'm working on this nonstop. But no historian has ever picked up on this. And yet they did exactly what we're doing, setting up towns for the Underground Railroad. What we're doing by getting land here is being a demonstration and showing by example. Larkin Rose, who also wrote that book about the most dangerous superstition, has a course called Candles in the Dark, where he teaches people how to talk to others, people who are in the dark. And he simply says the method is ask questions, the Socratic method.
Just like you said.
And Socrates, who invented the Socratic method, was killed because he got people to question things. And he was a beggar, he didn't have much possessions. Those people, like Jesus and Lao Tzu and the people that I study, they didn't have much possessions, and they didn't fear death, and they were the most free, and that's why they were killed. And you see this pattern in history. Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., civil disobedience. Love everybody. Love to the point where not even self-defense is an option. Let's go in the streets, let's walk with no arms. Let's overwhelm the jails. Invite the jails to us. Gandhi went to jail willingly. He overwhelmed the jails. They had to go to him in jail to make a deal with him to get his side. He's like, what can we do to make your people happy? Let us be free from the British. These are, and he read Etienne de la Boétie, who was a French writer, who was also known as the first anarchist in history. And he was inspired by Lao Tzu from the 300 BC. I mean, like, you just trace it back, you see these patterns, and nobody is talking about it. In independent media, what I want to mention, I'm sorry if I'm going on.
Yes.
But in the conspiracy community, in our community,
Good job. Keep going.
500 pages, read, buy the book.
but the conspiracy community, I see these patterns of behavior that can happen to us too. We have to be careful. So when he emphasizes self-work and being but the example, to me this is where all the work needs to happen. Because if we make ourselves them the enemy, and we defend, we create an us versus them. We are actually feeding the thing that we are against. And so there's a hidden psychology that we are not seeing in ourselves, even though we claim to be of the truth in the conspiracy crowd. And I see this with a lot of groups I go to. I go to a lot of Republican clubs, I go to flat earth meetups, and they're stuck in their worldview despite how thinking that no one else will believe in them. That's because they put that into their programming. They don't want to learn how to speak to others, how to educate others, or work as like a practitioner and work from where the patient is at. But that's why I find this material so useful, and why it can't be profited on, and why it's never talked about in any political campaign or whatsoever, because you can't. And it's just so, it's not material. And I think that's why some people have a hard time grasping it, but I think it takes practice. And I don't know how many people are willing to be educators. But this is what I mean by facilitation and education, and why that's the only solution, why political methods do not work and why they can't, because this mental stuff is so much more beyond it. So that's my point.
And I'd like to follow up on something you said by going back to when I was talking about when you're in an argument with your significant other. Problems in relationships, and I know that there are exceptions to this, but I largely believe now that this is because of both parties bringing their own wounds, their own crap from the past and then I activate my wife, and my wife activates me, and then we escalate up. And that in my practice, when I work with couples, I don't really sit with the couple. I mean, every so often I do, but what I say to them is, you have control over cleaning up your side of the street. The law of physics states that every action causes an equal and opposite reaction. Of course, when you're not as easily triggered, of course, when your old wounds are healed and you bring that back to this union, it has to be different. It can't be the same. And otherwise, you're making your husband or your wife the enemy in that case. They're not. If we have strife in our own home, if we have discord and disorder in our own home, how are we expecting to now go out into the world and bring what we want, which is some form of order and some form of peace, and above all, freedom? We can't really do that if we don't even have it at home. And I think we used to get this as humans. And we wanted politicians to not be what they are now, which is thieves. You know, they come in, they make $174,000 in Congress, and yet they're worth $17 million, $27 million. This is just thievery right out in the open.
Yep. Washington has the highest concentration of psychopaths in the whole nation.
We have to start, I think we have to start right with ourselves and say, you know, like, this is kind of Jesus, right? We're not perfect. I don't love the word sin, but if I interpret it as flaws and mistakes and errors, it makes more sense to me. Doesn't it make sense that we would clean that up? Gandhi said, be the change in the world you want to see. Now I understand what he meant. I didn't get it before.
So your suggestion for us to still go to other people that are very, very in their little tunnel is give us more of that, like what we're gonna
Ask questions.
Yes, like I know, ask questions.
And remember rapport.
Yeah, well, we always, that's why we get a
Love
lot
your
of people
neighbor,
on
love your
board, because
enemy.
we look pretty
Turn the
normal,
cheek.
if that's a thing. Anyway.
You have to be in a state of rapport, and rapport is a fragile state. It can be broken very quickly. And you can actually, this neurolinguistic programming teaches all about this. I wrote a book about this, that you can see people like in an airport who are in rapport because they'll literally mirror each other's bodies. You know, one person will be standing like this, talking to the other person, and the other person standing like this.
Yeah.
And notice yourself when you go home. This is hardwired. And when it comes into your attention, you're like, oh my God, I'm mirroring that other person. When you're talking to an audience, you can tell if you have rapport with these people or not. People speak in different ways. They use things called verbal predicates. So people usually are either in their language primarily visual language, I see what you're saying, or they're auditory, I hear what you're saying, or they're kinesthetic, I feel what you mean by that. And if you've got a visually oriented person talking to a kinesthetic person, you can get these disconnects. And if you understand this, and you can bring your language around to their verbal predicates, you can watch them lean into you. You can watch them start to mirror your body position. These principles, again, it's a technology, it's a power. It can be used for good, it could be used for ill. When I had a business succeed, a security guard business, sold it for some money, yeah, this is great. I bought another business, made a total mistake. And I had to sell it and go back to the workforce. And when I went back to the workforce, I hadn't been in it for a while, and I wanted a good paying job. And so I had like 4 interviews, and I used these techniques with the vice president and the president. And I watched as I got rapport with vice president, got that, start working on the vice president, talk, got it there. Wait for the offer to come in, which it did.
It's really selling yourself.
Yeah.
It's harnessing the understanding that 93%, 97% of our brain's processing power is subconscious. If it wasn't, we would be autistic. We couldn't handle all the data coming at us from the outside and from the inside. So we rely on these automatic processes. We can't remember to beat our heart. Something has to do that for us, our autonomic nervous system, controlled by the subconscious mind. And if you understand this, you can start to get an idea of, wow, I can be a little bit more effective in my communication. And realize that this technology is used against us. I'll give you one quick example, and then we should probably end. But there's something called anchoring. So You guys have probably heard about Ivan Pavlov, like if you took a psychology class. This is the Russian scientist who conditioned a dog by ringing a bell and then giving the dog meat powder. Conditions for a period of time, and then all he has to do is ring the bell and the dog salivates, because these two phenomena has been linked or anchored together. Well, a speaker can do this by coming out into the auditorium and speaking to people in kinesthetic language. That brain, it's not stupid, but it processes things more slowly because it goes through feeling. And then as the speech develops, they can move into auditory language. And then as the crescendo, they move into visual language. The shining city on the hill is an example of visual language that the sophisticated speaker would use at the end. And if they were really sophisticated, every time they said something that the audience they knew was going to really love, or a joke or something like that, or asked them to, I just want you to go in your mind and think about your last vacation, right? And when they do that, they stand in a particular place on the stage and they adjust their tie as these people are going into their minds thinking about their vacation. I've now set the anchor. So later in the speech, I've gone through the kinesthetic language, I've gone through the auditory language, now I'm moving into the visual, the shining city on the hill, and I take the same spot and I adjust my tie. Fires the anchor in everybody, and they feel that feeling of being on vacation. They associate it with me. And their techniques are way beyond what I have access to.
So question for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned the word autistic.
Yes.
How do you communicate with an autistic person to connect with them? Because a lot of times, like my son has Asperger's, so he can be, he doesn't show emotion. Okay, so, and he's not empathetic at all. So he can seem very cold to certain people, and it's gotten him fired from a numerous amount of jobs. But I think he's finally in a place where they kind of understand him and they work with him. But when there's conflict between the two of us, because I need him to do something and he won't do it, or I have to keep on, without repetition, right? Repeating the same thing and asking until the point where I have to be like, okay, if you're not going to do this, this is going to be the consequence. Kind of treating him back again like he was a little child. And then it will get him to do what I want him to do, but it's like I don't want to go there. It's like I want there to be a better flow of communication between him and I, where things are smoother and don't get to that point where it's like, I'm forcing you to do something.
How old is he?
28.
Okay. All right. So I have
Old school, slap him. So there's two therapies. I was at Stanford. Like I said, I'm a scientist. And one is called optoacoustic therapy. And the other one is called transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's all in the experimental therapy, but I was part of this program where they're actually showing for autistic children as well as ADHD children that it's working. So I can put my email down and people can contact me with it.
Yeah, that would be great.
For time being, while she's waiting for this technology stuff to go through,
Yeah.
is there any
Yeah, so my suggestion would be, NLP calls it mirror, pace, and lead. So I talked about rapport. If you want rapport with another human being, the process you go through, the process I went through with the vice president and the president of that company, was mirror, pace, and lead. You just subtly mirror some of his physicality or some of his verbal predicates that he's using that I talked about before, or some of maybe his tone. What this does is subconsciously, it causes the other person, it's hardwired to feel like she gets me, she understands me, I'm safe with her, she's in my tribe. And when that happens, the defenses go down and the subconscious mind opens. You can relax in the presence of this person. Now that can be broken that fast, but as long as you have that rapport, you have a chance to reach him, right? So I would say that's the best thing that I can offer you, because I'm certainly not an expert in people with autism. I never work with them in my practice. That's beyond my scope. But I would say mirror, pace, and lead. The other thing I would say, and for a 28-year-old, I don't even know the ethics of this. You know, if it's a 28-year-old that doesn't have some neurological issues, probably not ethical. But what I used to do with my children, my eldest son, when he was like 10, would be kind of bullying to my daughter, who was 8 at the time, or 9 and 7, something like that. And I would go into his room at night when he was sleeping, knowing that when a person's asleep, their subconscious mind is out of the way, it's disabled, and it's just the subconscious mind. And what is the subconscious mind? It's wide open like a small child.
Yeah.
And so I would just pull up a chair next to his bed while he's sleeping, and I would just sit there and I would say, "Oh, Charlie, you love your sister. It's so wonderful to be kind to her and gentle to her. She loves it when you're kind and gentle to her, and your parents just get big smiles on their face, and you feel wonderful when you're kind to her."
Is that the view?
And the next day, I would watch as he unfolded this behavior.
Wow.
So I don't know what the right answer is for a 28-year-old son.
Boy, I'm a
who's-
little worried that you've done this to the wife.
You'll marry me, like me.
I remember when you woke up, you said I spoke to you?
It's interesting, right? Because Mark Passio, you know, who connected a lot of people, I don't know, but yeah, he talks about occultism, and occultism is considered the study of like science that's outside of science, and apparently, according to his teachings, right, he said it's always been passed word of mouth. There were always people who kept knowledge for generations and generations about psychology and how to work things, and science is just kind of catching up to what the occultists were understanding. Like Rudolf Steiner was considered like in that realm too, but like Manly P. Hall, and if you actually go online and look up these people, they do have archives, and some of them like have recordings and books, and you can find their stuff, and it's extremely deep. You'd think that they are psychologists, but they're like on a whole nother level, and they're talking about, you know, what may be called metaphysics and what quantum physics. I mean, I don't know. I'm learning all that stuff, but that stuff is like kept for the Freemasons and a lot of people. And I know someone who went to like a Catholic church, got out of that, nothing was helping him, and the only thing that helped him was actually reading some of these texts. And he was not a Freemason. He started reading their text and the knowledge that they keep hidden to themselves. And instead, he used it for himself, and he found out, wait, they're borrowing from all these different cultures, and they're seeing some of these deeper pictures. So I don't know what your
So
view is.
let me, if you will indulge me in one more story, that we are way bigger than we think we are. And this story that I'm going to tell you now, I think will illustrate this point about how we affect other people. And this also will give us a window into answering your question. And then answering the question of what can we do with family members who are just walled off, or in your case, with your dad who's passing away. There, you know, I would assume most people have heard of the concept of the quantum field. Right? The quantum field is this concept that everything that has ever existed and all possibilities for the future exist in the quantum field. We are spiritual beings having this temporary experience. We don't even know why we need to sleep a third of our lives. But I would say it goes beyond just washing out our brain, because that's what scientists are saying now. We're washing toxins out of our brain. We're processing things that happen in the day. But I think we're going home, and we're doing work there. Well, this story is 46-year-old blue-collar worker guy. He's like a contractor. I'm working with him on his situation with his girlfriend, and he's feeling all this heartbreak and grief over the dissolution of this relationship. And as part of working with him, we get to this part where he's always had this horrible relationship with his dad, and that's the kind of origin of his original wound that now gets activated by the girlfriend when she leaves him. Well, we do this work in hypnosis in my office where it's going into the spiritual realm, his spirit guide connecting with his father in the quantum field, right, and making a resolution in the quantum field between him and his father. His father is not in the room, doesn't even know his son is doing this.
Well,
Next,
he may well, but he's not.
not consciously.
Yeah.
He's not consciously aware of this. The next time this client comes in, he says, "You're not going to believe this. I went over to my parents' house after the session on Tuesday night." This is like the next Tuesday. And my father and my mother and I have dinner the way we always do. My father's surly. He doesn't say anything the way he normally does. He gets up without saying anything from the table and sits down in his easy chair and starts watching TV, and I talk to my mother. All normal. All of a sudden, father turns around, looks at his wife and his son and goes, "I'm really sorry I've been such an asshole for so many years."
Wow.
He's never apologized to his son, not even once. His son has never seen him apologize to his mother, not even once. And this is not the only time I've witnessed this. I've witnessed it many, 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 many times. We have an ability within our consciousness, which is our greatest power. It's not the 0.0035% that we can see with the light spectrum. It's not how fast you run. Gazelles go a lot faster. It's not your hearing. It's our consciousness, our creativity, what we can create that doesn't yet exist, and the ability to connect to other beings through our consciousness. We can do this and affect other people. So this is something you can do. When people pray for someone else, that's kind of that idea, but you can take it further. You know, you can connect with your Father through your consciousness. He doesn't have to be even in a physical body anymore. You can communicate. You don't have to be a psychic. We all have this ability.
It's part of Project Stargate and Sunstreak, the CIA back in the early 70s. It started this all the way up to the 1990s. And now DARPA has what's called the Brain Initiative and the Mind Hive, where we're all connected. They don't need to connect us with wires. I could send you
Isn't there
information.
also a concept called morphic resonance?
Yep. Yep. So these are more esoteric concepts for how we can make a difference. You know, I believe it's true when they say that when Jesus was on this planet, that he could affect people hundreds of miles away from him due to the magnetic resonance or whatever it is of his heart. I don't know what it was, but something was causing him to be affecting other people. Right.
I study a lot of this.
Okay, so you probably know the whole 6 foot thing. It's
Yes.
that the average person supposedly can affect people within 6 feet of them energetically.
Once, why do you think they
That's
did
why
with the
you gotta
COVID
stand
with
in
the
a
6 foot
circle.
distance?
That's exactly why I brought it up. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
along with the radio frequency identification, so that they can tell that we're. So right now, they don't know that there's this many individuals in this room from satellite.
Yep.
But if I moved apart, they can tell that I'm a separate person. So that's where the 6 foot distancing comes from.
Precisely. So my larger point is I feel like we're in a spiritual war, and that there are certain principles that have been around since ancient times, and that this is the way we fight. Sun Tzu said, don't fight on their battlefield, fight on yours. Don't fight at their time, fight at your time. Don't use their weapons, use your weapons. So that's all I have for you guys tonight. Thank you so much for